You're with Peter Goers.
Peter Goers.
On ABC Radio Adelaide, South Australia and Broken Hill.
In a moment we'll hear from Bodie Thorpe from the Bus Preservation Association of South Australia. But here's a request. Can we hear Magic Bus by The Who? That's from Dave. Makes sense given our next segment. Here it is, Dave. Magic Bus by The Who, and that was Dave's request. Let's go to Bodie Thorpe, Secretary of the Bus Preservation Association of South Australia. G'day, Bodie.
Good evening, Peter.
I've never met anyone called Bodie.
Yeah, it's a bit of an unusual name, isn't it?
Do you collect buses? I mean, some people collect, stamps, coins. You collect buses.
I don't quite know how it happened, but it seems that I do collect buses, and I've got 4 now.
Where do you put them?
That escalated quickly. Thankfully, I've got quite a big property, and so I just have them in my driveway, just as one does, I guess.
As one does. What buses do you have?
So all of my buses are ex-South Australian government buses. Mm-hmm. So I've got buses that were introduced from 1980 through to the most recent one I bought was one that was introduced in 1992. So it sort of spanned that whole 80s decade. So they're all 80s buses.
Do people buy them and convert them, like the Partridge Family?
They do, yeah. That's a very popular thing to do, and it's always what people ask me. They say, "Oh, are you going to convert them and travel around Australia in them?" But that's not my plans with mine. But that's certainly something I see a lot, or at least people buy them, pull the seats out, and go, "Well, this is way too hard," and try and sell them as an empty shell.
Do you take them for a spin?
I do, yes. Yeah, I try and take them for a spin, my sort of weekend sports car, but I guess it's not as easy as that when you have a bus. And then there's, registration and things like that. So I don't drive them as much as I would like to or get the opportunity to, but as much as I possibly can.
I like the sound of these, but well-worn by custom. You can imagine the hundreds of thousands of people that have been through this bus, getting on in peak hour to go to work, their hair smelling of shampoo and coming home a bit frazzled and tired and footsore, with the shopping in peak hour, or using them, after a big night, or, people visiting people or going to the shops. Buses are a big part of our lives, aren't they?
They are indeed, and I think that it's very, very profound when people come to me, when they say, "Oh, you've got an old bus," and everyone, immediately lights up and always has a story to tell about, an old bus, whether it's, going to school with mates, South Australia's had the very sort of iconic older silver buses, and, people say, "Oh, you just about get a leg wax on a hot day on the vinyl red seats," or, lots of the young kids going to school on a bendy bus, they'd say, "Oh, if you sit on the back seat when you go over the train crossing, you'd fly half a metre up into the air." So, yeah, it's always a very emotive topic, and people seem to always, their face lights up with nostalgia when you start talking about old buses.
Well, buses have been in the news because of the backflip on the government's plan to get rid of nearly 1,000 bus stops, making public transport perhaps faster but much less accessible. That was reversed. Happily, I would imagine. In your opinion, Bodie?
Mixed feelings on that one. I think, there was some really good proposals in there, but I guess whenever something tries to be cut, you don't want it to go too far. So I think, for some users, it's definitely a win, but maybe for others, it would have been good for a little bit of change to occur. But nonetheless, lots of buses still for everyone, so that is a good thing.
Were these MTT buses?
Some of them were, yeah. They've been around since the MTT days. Not mine personally, but in the group, we have some older buses that were around in the MTT days.
That was
and certainly that old silver...
Metropolitan Tramways Trust, yes. And which had trams and buses. That's right,
and they ran the buses for a number of years, and they had the iconic silver colours that carried onto the bus fleet all the way into the early 80s.
And they carried tickets printed by Kenneth Leal, with little aphorisms on the back, which you'd remember, Bodie, little sayings on the back.
Yes, the little sayings. Yes, I like a few of those sayings.
Yes, they were part of the experience, weren't they? You'd turn the ticket over, the little papery ticket, and on the back would be something which was meant to inspire you or amuse you as you trundled to work. Yeah. When did the MTT stop?
Oh, that's a good question. It was 1977 or 1978, I believe, when the State Transport Authority was formed.
Yes.
And so then they took the MTT and a lot of the private bus operators that existed at the time and took it back under government ownership. So they bought up a lot of buses and took control. So the complete opposite now, where we privatise the operation of the services again. So it's sort of gone full circle since, in about 40 years.
And now it's privatised, of course, Serco and another company.
Serco have been gone for a little while now. So, just recently there was some new contracts awarded, just started at the beginning of the financial year. So we've got Torrens Transit and Southlink who are already operating buses, and we've got a new company called Busways that have come from New South Wales to operate some buses as well.
And do we own the buses and they run them, or do they own the buses? The government, you and I, taxpayer, we own the buses, and the government controls the network, and they just pay the companies to operate and look after the buses and do all the operations. And so do you buy, Bodie Thorpe here, Secretary of the Bus Preservation Association of South Australia, I love this group, do you buy them at auction, do you?
So a lot of us have bought our buses from government auction, or they've put them out to tender at the end of their lives to see what the worth of these vehicles are. But then other ones have come to us privately. So back in the day, the buses, there was a big market for second-hand buses because all the government fleet were regarded as such well looked after buses, and they would retire them at 25 years old. And so lots of private operators and other people would buy these vehicles. So a lot of our vehicles have come to us after a second life as a school bus or as a charter bus. But now with some changes to laws, basically any bus over 25 is deemed not suitable for a charter or school bus or hire and reward situation. So the second-hand market for buses has sort of disappeared, and as such it's only preservationists such as myself or people that might want to make a camper van, or I guess they can make a reasonable shed on wheels or something, I guess. Yes. I've even seen a few turned into food trucks or cafes. There's an old school bus that's a cafe. So there's some, if your imagination is good, you could have a lot of cool things out of an old bus.
What would you pay? What's the minimum, what's the maximum you've paid for your buses, Bodie?
So I paid $8,000 for one of my first one, but because there's not really any market for them, I've paid as little as $3,300.
Really?
So the old buses are not too expensive to buy, but to keep them on the road, that's the bit that will get you.
How many of them are Volvos?
So in our group, we have, off the top of my head, I think we've got about 8 Volvos. We've got a lot of MANs.
What's MA on?
The Volvos are pretty good.
Of course they are.
And we've got a few Mercedes buses which were introduced. They're the ones that used to run on the O-Bahn. So they're unique South Australian history pieces in terms of the fact that having the guided busway is pretty unique to South Australia.
Bodie Thorpe here of the Bus Preservation Association of South. Yeah, I think you're marvellous. How did you get interested in collecting buses?
That's a good question. It's sort of just one of those strange things, I guess. You like them when you're little, you grow up and you still sort of, like them and you're interested in them. And then someone says you should buy one, you see some other people that you know have one, you think, oh, that would be fun. And then, someone started it somewhere, and then we've all copied, and now we have an association that has about 30 buses between about 14 people. So it's very quickly growing, and we've only very recently incorporated as a group together. So, we hope to do some more formal events and tours and pop-up museums and things like that to sort of engage with the public.
I salute you, because you're preserving the transport history of South Australia, and it's a fact. What's your job of work, Bodie?
So I'm a registered nurse, but I was a bus driver when I was at uni, and a little while after that as well. So
it's a tough job. I think it's a tough and often thankless job, bus driving, particularly because they have to do the tickets as well. It's and they're dealing with all kinds of people chemically enhanced, people on the lair, people who are disruptive, and nice people.
It is. It can be a very challenging job, and you're always looking at the clock. It's a bit of a time pressured job as well. But it can also be, a very rewarding job. I've done some great evenings, like, New Year's Eve, where, everyone's really happy. Everyone wants to be on your bus, and some really cool charters, like when the airport opened for the new terminal. There was a big open day, and we provided charter buses to get people in the airport. So, as a bus driver, you can do some really cool jobs as well, as take people to work where no one wants to be on the bus.
Do you have a significant other, Bodie?
I do have a partner who's very supportive of the whole bus thing, thankfully.
Good. Because that could be a deal breaker, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I'm a bus collector. Good luck to you, Bodie, and you sound like a good guy, and I like the sound of this, the Bus Preservation Association of South Australia. And we salute the fact that last week marked the last service run of a non-wheelchair accessible bus with push exit doors, and you were there to see that, weren't you?
That's right. So, that was a bit abrupt. The government decided that the end was about to happen a little bit sooner than it could have. But, those buses were the last buses that aren't accessible to everyone. So now I guess a new chapter starts.
Every bus on the road is wheelchair accessible.
Every bus in the government service is wheelchair accessible now,
terrific.
Which is great for people who use wheelchairs, and I guess also people with prams and shopping trolleys. Makes everyone's lives easier.
I can see parties happening in buses. I think that would be fun. You could hire it out for parties. I mean, just park it somewhere and have a party. Somebody's place. There are lots of possibilities. This fascinates me. Keep in touch, Bodie. I'd love to see some of your buses and come to an event. Good luck to you and your association.
Would love to have you.
Thank you. Bodie Thorpe there, Secretary of the Bus Preservation Association of South Australia. Good on him.